Okay, we're Daf Samech Amid Aleph, 5 lines into the page. We're continuing in this strange conversations between the Caesar and Rav Yeshua ben Hanania, where he wants to see Hashem, he wants to interact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara says, Amar le Kesar Yeshua ben Hanania. The Caesar said to Yeshua ben Hanania, Be'ina de'itzvus le namele lekechu. I want to make a meal for your God. I want to make a meal for him. Whatever this means. Amar le Matzis, or Yeshua ben Hanania says, it's not possible. You can't make food enough to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amai says, why not? He says, Nafishe chavase. So Rav Shimon Hanani said, forget about Hashem, just the amount of malachim that Hashem comes with, his entourage is very, very big. You're not going to be able to feed all them. Amar le Ivra, he says, I will, you just have to help me. Okay. So Amar le, pukt svis legeda derevisa derevicha alma. Find an open area by the river. An open area by the river, that was a giant open area, and I want you to prepare the feast there. Put all the food out by the river that you're going to feed. Tarach shita yarachi kaita. For 6 months of the summer, he's preparing food. And then what happens right before the meal? Asa zika kanshe liyoma. A giant wind comes and just blows all the food into the water. So tarach shita yarchi desavasa. So the next 6 months of winter, he does it again. But this time, asa mitra tavai biyama. A giant rain came and just washes out the food. So Amalei Mai Hai. So the Caesar says to Yeshua Chanani, what's going on? Amalei, he says, Hani kinusai zucholoi dasekamei. What they would do is, before the chash of a person would come to a house, they would sprinkle water on the floor. They would basically do the cleaners that would come before the chash of a person. They would send cleaners to the house to make sure the house is clean. So he says, this rain and this wind is just the cleaners before Hashem shows up. In other words, I don't know what the message is, whatever, but he's saying it's impossible to make a meal because whatever you're going to do, there's always the cleaners are always going to wipe it away. So then the Caesar says, son, I won't be able to. It's not going to work out. So the next Gemara story, the last story about this, is Amrle Bas Kesar Yeshua ben Hanania. The Caesar's daughter said to Yeshua ben Hanania as follows: Elokechen nagrahu, your God is a carpenter, which has been a complaint. That's not just a strange taina. That's a problem that we had with Yashka, right? He was a carpenter, if I'm not mistaken. He was a carpenter, so maybe this has to do with that Mishagas. I'm assuming, well, you see from the way the story goes, the Rabbi Shimon Hanani is much tougher with her than he is with the father, either because he was more afraid of the father, or because this was a taina that he felt was more claiming that Hashem is, God forbid, a person, which is a much bigger affront than her father, who wanted to honor Hashem and wanted to see Hashem. This she's saying that your God is a carpenter. What's the source? It said that Hashem put a roof over the waters of the world. When Hashem created the world, He put a roof. Who makes roofs? Carpenters. She said your God's a carpenter. So So she said to Rabbi Shimon Hanania, tell your God, who's a carpenter, to make me a reel. A reel was it would hold yarn. It was like a piece of wood that you would wrap the yarn around. Again, it seems to be a more disrespectful taina. If your God is a chashiv, he's a carpenter, make him make something for me. So this is what he did. So Omer L'chai, Rav Yeshua said, fine, I'll do this. By Rachme, he davened. And she became a leper. She had leprosy. Apparently, in the Roman times, if you had leprosy, you would go to the marketplace. They would give you that piece of wood, that thing that she was asking for. You would sit there with yarn all day, and everyone would walk past, and they would see the leper, and they would pray for you. So there was like a bezyonis de gazach in the Roman society. So the point is, God gave her that spool, whatever that's called. So he says, so they placed her in the marketplace of Rome and gave her that reel. Because that was the minig in Rome, that anyone who had saras, anyone who was a leper, would sit in the marketplace with that reel, and he would just wind thread all day. That's what the lepers would do all day. So that people would see them and pray for them. So Yom Echad have a kachol of and one day Rav Yeshua is passing the marketplace, have a Yosef v'sasa dilasa b'shuka d'Ramai, and he sees her sitting there, winding the string around the reel. So Amar he said to her, Shapir t'mistursa d'yavi. Are you happy with the reel that God made for you? Because it was His tefillah that Hashem sent down the illness. Amar she said, so she said, please ask your God to take back his gift. So Amar La, he said to her, Elakoti dan mi of Yohev, mishkale shakal. Our God gives, he doesn't taketh. So sorry, he's gives, but he doesn't take it back. Okay, I have to know what these stories mean on a deeper madrega. Okay, Rav Yehuda Shar Karsan Ufarsasan. In ox is described the qualities of a healthy normal ox is that it has a very big belly and it's broad. Okay, but a donkey, and I'm sorry, Rav Reishev and Rav Gunvase, its tail is big and its head is big. The chilufa bechamra, but the opposite is true by a donkey. It's thinner by its belly, and it's thinner by and it's, I guess its head is smaller than the belly. The belly is thinner. Okay, whatever these descriptors are for a donkey and an ox. So the Gemara says, "L'man nafkamina." Who cares? I'm not sure what exactly is the difference of knowing what an ox's description is and a donkey. So the Gemara says, "L'mekach u'memkar." You have this answer sometimes throughout Shas. It's negea business. I ask Rabbi, I say, "Hey, sell me a donkey." You give me an animal that's a zebra, and you're like, "No, it's a donkey." Well, we just described the characteristics of a donkey. It's thin-bellied and its head is not as large. So then if the animal doesn't fit that description, I can get my money back. If it fits that description, because sometimes you have people go to different communities, and what we call donkey over here, maybe it's not what you call donkey over there. So these are the descriptors of a donkey. Rav Yehuda, Shar Shehikr V'Adam Rishon, the very famous Gemaras. Today's daf has probably one of the most famous Gemaras in all Shas. We're going to get to these are famous, but Amud Beis is mamish, the most famous, one of the most famous Gemara, top 10 in all Shas. The Gemara says, Shar Shehikr V'Adam Rishon. The ox that Adam Rishon brought as a carbon, Keren Achas Haisle B'Metzcha, it had a single horn in its forehead, like a unicorn. Shenemar, what's the source that had a single horn? Batitev LaHashem, and I praised Hashem, meaning through this carbon, Mishar Par, Makrin Mafris, that I gave an ox bull, some sort of animal, shar par, a combination shar par, whatever is a shar, but had certain par-like characteristics. Makrin mafris. Makrin, although it's written makrin, it's read makrin, but the way it's written is keren, single horn, mafris, and it has hooves. So makrin, tarti mashma, Amar Rav Nachman mikeren ksiv. Although makrin is read, plural, but it's written mikeren. Okay. Rav Yehuda, Shar Shikri V'Adam Marisha in Karnav Koidel Parsaisov. Right, a baby when it's healthy comes out head first. Right, if it's feet first, it's no good. Right, that's breaching. Right, so a baby comes out head first. Says the Gemara that the Shar of Adam Marishan, its horn came before its hooves. In other words, when it came out of its mother, it came out with a horn. Why? So this is the aside that all things that were created. Right, which one came first, the chicken or the egg? Chicken. All things were created full-sized. So that first shar that came into existence, whatever it means, it doesn't mean it was actually birthed, but it means that its horn came before its hooves. In other words, when it came into existence, it already had a horn. As if it was born, it would be head first, so it would be horn before hooves. I don't think it was actually born because it was the first. Huh?
I thought it was I was imagining it snapped his fingers.
Correct. Whatever the pshat is, I'm saying, however the first animals were created, I don't know if they were birthed from other animals, so maybe the chicken eggs still exist. But the point is, when the first shar came into existence, it didn't grow and then age. It came in fully developed. Adam Rishon was born strong, whatever middle. What's the peak of a person? By Jews, the athleticism peaks at like 18, but for the Goyim, it's like I think 30. I think they say it's 30. So Adam Rishon was born at 30. He was born fully developed. Its horn came before its hooves, meaning it was born with already horns. Makrin mafris. Keren before prasim, before the hooves. Makrin bereisha of other mafris, first the horn and then the hooves. Misayel Rishub and Levi, Misarayt Rishub and Levi, Dam Rishub and Levi, call Maisa bereishis. All creations, the first creations, b'kaimasa nivru, they were created with their full height, b'daita nivru, with their full das, b'tzivyoyna nivru, with the full desires. In other words, fully developed in all ways, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all fully developed. Shenemar, v'yechul hashemayim v'aretz v'chol tzavaam. Tzavaam means come, and their leader, their host, but he says, al tikri tzavaam el tzivyoynim. Tzivyonim doesn't mean their host, but their desires, meaning their desires were already created. Darsh Rav Chanina bar Papa, Yichavayir Hashem la'olam yismach Hashem b'ma'asav. This is a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk in Tehillim says that the glory of Hashem will be forever. Let Hashem rejoice in His creations. That the creations bring simchat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Now this is actually a big aside. Not everything in Tehillim was written by David HaMelech. David HaMelech wrote it all down, but some of the things were already authored before David HaMelech. Some of the things were said by Adam Rishon, by Moshe, by Avram, Yitzchak. Right? Kalu tfilas no, but it says there's a pasuk in Tzadi. It's about Moshe Rabbeinu. So my brain Tzadi is Tfilah Moshe. It's Tfilah Moshe Shilkim. The point is that was Moshe Rabbeinu said. So a lot of Tehillim were already said before him. This was said at the beginning of creation. The pasuk says that Hashem will rejoice over its creations. This is a reference to the following story. Pasuk says Sar ha'olam amru. This pasuk was said by the Sar ha'olam. Sar ha'olam, says Rashi, is a malach. Which malach? Tosfos says it was Chanoich who turned into Matat. We don't say his full name, but Matat, the most highest form of a malach, the highest malach of all time. He said the following. We find like this, when Hashem made two commands in the beginning of creation when it comes to the fruits and vegetation. The trees, Hashem said liminehu, which means each tree should come out separate from the other tree. The apple tree should not touch the pear tree and the peach and everything separate. But Hashem never said the same command by the herbs, by grass and other vegetation. So why didn't the grass all come in one just jumbled? By the trees, Hashem specifically commanded each tree should have its own root and have its own system. But by Hashem never said that by the vegetation. So it says the Gemara, Nosu tisham kavachomer atzman. Herbs made the following kavachomer. They said, if Hashem wanted all just one big hodgepodge, one big mosh pit of things, then why by the trees did Hashem command each tree to be separate? So it must be kavachomer, and so it must be the Ratzon Hashem is to have each thing on its own. And what's the kavachomer? Kavachomer. Ma ilona shein dark lotzis barbuv yamar kadosh baruch hu mineyu onu lachas kama v'kama. Trees normally come out separate naturally because the way trees are shaped, they're very big and they're pretty distinct. So trees, you could argue, Hashem doesn't even have to tell you to command to come separately. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded it seems unnecessary. And yet Hashem still said, no, I want you to be separate. Then herbs, which could come out all compact together and all affected by each other, Kavachomer Hashem wants it separate. In other words, Hashem's commanding trees where it seems to be an unnecessary command and still shows you how much the Ratzon Hashem is for each tree to come out separately. Kavachomer, the herbs. So they made a Kavachomer. So they came out on their own. And at that moment, Matat made the following pasuk: that Hashem will rejoice over His creations because Hashem was happy with that decision that they made. That kavachem. Boy, Ravina Sakasha. Now, when it comes to klayim, very very quick. This is the only halacha of the entire daf, and it's a teiku. There are different prohibitions of klayim. One is to plant seeds together, and one is to graft one on top of the other. So the question is like this: when it comes to planting seeds together, you're not allowed to plant any types of plants together, even if they're not, even if they're not edible. Yeah, he says like this. I'm sorry, over here. Here. The prohibition against mixed sowing is limited that it pertains only to plants such as grains, legumes, and vegetables. Trees and inedible herbage are not subject to this prohibition. You're allowed to plant. So I'm sorry, just to speak it out. You're allowed to take plants that aren't edible and plant them together. That's fine. There's no isser of mix of klayim by planting seeds together. You could take a rose bush and you could take a tulip and you could plant them together. That's not a problem. Right next to each other. It's only a problem if they're edible. The question is, what about grafting onto each other? You'll say, well, if you're allowed to plant them together, then somebody could graft them together. Yeah, but over here you see that when Hashem, add some of the Shiloh. Hashem never commanded the rose to come out separate from the tulip, right? What happened was they made a kavachomer and then Hashem was masking. If Hashem had commanded them to grow separately, then you can't graft on each other. But the question is Hashem being maskim enough to create an Isser forever. That's the fundamental shot. So says the Gemara, by Ravina, here give Shnei Deshoim Zal Gavzeh, if you have two herbs that are not edible, and you graft one on top of the other, go to the next page. Rav Chanina Bar Papa Mai. According to Rav Chanina Bar Papa, is an Issa Deraisa. What's the Shaila? Kivin like Sibu Liminayu. Do we say that because Hashem never specifically commanded the herbs to come out that way? Loi Mechayiv. Hashem never asered it. Oidilma Kivin de Hiskim Adayu, or you perhaps because they made a Kavachomer and Hashem was maskim Kimad de Chsiv Liminayu Damya. It's as if Hashem commanded them to not graft on each other and to give each other space. Teku unclear. Now we're going to do probably the most famous Gemara, top 10 Gemaras in all of Shas. Rav Shimon Pazi Rami, Rav Shimon Pazi famously said a contradiction. It says that Hashem created, I think this is the second day of creation, that Hashem created the two great luminaries, the sun and the moon, but they're both called great, meaning that they're the same size. Uksiv es hamara gadol es hamara katan, but we know that the sun is greater than the moon. So what happened? So it says the Gemara, Amr Yerech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The moon said to Hashem, Rabbeinu Shel Olam, Efshel Shnei Malachim sheishtamshu b'keser echad. You can't have two kings with one crown. Two kings and one crown doesn't work with the adage they have nowadays. You have two quarterbacks, you got no quarterback, right? So that's the point. So you can't have a sun and a moon together. So the moon said this to Hashem. So Amr Lei, so Hashem said, fine. I have a good solution. You'll be smaller. All of a sudden, there's no two kings. There's a king and a prince. So says the Gemara, Amr Lefan. This is the most famous, the moon being, diminished in the beginning of time. Is a very famous chazal. So Amr Lefan. So the moon said to Hashem, Rabbeinu Shel Olam, Hoyel v'amayit lefenecha davar hagan hamet hasatzmi. Well, because I made a good argument, I should be punished. Punish the sun. What did I do wrong? So Amr Allah. So Hashem said, you're right. But don't worry. Although I made you smaller, you're also going to be out during the day. If you look, there are certain times of the month where the moon is visible during the day. So don't worry, that's like my way to appease you. So Amar Alei, so the moon said to this Hashem, my Rabbi said, what's the difference if I'm out during the day? I don't give off any light, right? During the day, the moon's light is batel mamish compared to the sun. The sharga b'tihara mayahanile. What's the use of a candle in the daylight? Meaning, in other words, give me daylight. What's for what? It doesn't do anything. Amr Lo, Hashem responded, Zil limnu kach Yisrael yam v'shanim. Okay, I'll appease you this way. Klal Yisrael will count the calendar by the lunar calendar. So Amr Lo, the moon responded, Yom Nami. Yeah, but even the sun, Yevshad lo eliminated to kufase. Klal Yisrael still uses the sun for certain things, right? The Yom Tovim are not just dictated by the moon, they're also dictated by the sun, right? Because you have the length of days is based on the equinox. And that affects Pesach and Shavuos. Chazal will always keep Pesach at a certain time, right? They deal with the seasons, right? Pesach always has to be a certain season, Sukkot always has a certain season, and that's the sun. So the moon is saying it's not just me. I mean, I'm sort of in partnership with them. I don't have that bilos. So Hashem said, okay, I'll give you another one. Zil likrit tzadikim b'shmecha. Tzadikim will be called small like you. You have Yaakov HaKatan. There's a pasuk in Tanakh that reference to Yaakov being small. Shmuel HaKatan. It's unclear what that pasuk is. David HaKatan. David is called the youngest of the brothers. And the moon is small, so they're reference to you. So
Shmuel HaKatan was the first.
No. This is a reference to Shmuel HaNavi. But it's unclear. Rashi says he's not sure where... So some of Farshim say that Shmuel HaKatan was the Tana, Shmuel. But Pashas it was referring, because it says Yaakov, David, and then in between is Shmuel. Pashas it's referring to Shmuel HaNavi. Unclear when he's called Katan in Tanakh. Okay. So he says, Chazi Deloikam Yasav, Hashem saw that this was not making the moon happy. So Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Heviya Kapar Elishem Et Yasi Yisrael. Hashem says, please forgive me for making you small. And that's the Rosh Chodesh, the Sa'ir that goes on Rosh Chodesh. There's the Rosh Chodesh Sa'ir, the Chatas, that is brought every Rosh Chodesh. So what's the sin offering that's brought every Rosh Chodesh? What do we do wrong every Rosh Chodesh? So the answer is, the sin offering is to Mechaper for HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol. Haynu Dam Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Man Ishtana Sa'ir Shal Rosh Chodesh Shenemer by LaHashem. It says regarding the Sa'ir of Rosh Chodesh, the Chatas Rosh Chodesh, it says LaHashem. It's the pasuk is LaHashem, doesn't say that by the other karbanos. Why? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Sar Zeh Yechapar Alai Sheitat Yisrael. Rav Olson is masber, by the way, from the Baal Shem Tov, that the moon being diminished, Klal Yisrael compared to the moon, the diminishing of the moon is the creation of the possibility of galus. And Hashem is explaining why there might be good kindness, good reasons, but at the end of the day, Hashem says, no, Please forgive me for making you small. So anyway, Ravasi says, I have a contradiction. Yeah?
The Sarah should like make the moon small, let's make it big. Like, why is he like, oh, I'm so sorry? Like,
that's the point. According to Wilson, it's a reference to Klal Yisrael being in Golus. And that's sort of irreversible until Mashiach comes. Meaning, it's like the Derech Hashem describes that since the sin of the Eitz Hadas, this world it cannot be fixed fully b'shleimus until Bias Goyal. Until then, you could have a Beis Hamikdash, you could have a Beis Hamikdash Sheni, you could have Nevi'im, but it's still Shigul Golos. So the Gemara says, Rav Asi says, I have a contradiction. When did the vegetation come forth? On the third day of creation, it says that Hashem brought forth vegetation, which implies that the third day of creation, everything's already there. But the problem is also, it says, but it says that Erev Shabbos, the vegetation was not yet visible. So was it created on the third or the sixth? So the Gemara says very simply, Hashem created on the third, but they were right beneath the surface. What were they waiting for? They were waiting for other Mauritians to be created to daven for rain, and then once the rain came forth, then they came out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in such a way, and this is the form of creation that Hashem always wants his sarusa dilatata. Hashem always wants his saris from down here. So Hashem created the possibility of grain and vegetation, but it was beneath the surface, waiting for humans to daven, and then that brings forth bracha. Hashem is waiting for the tefillah of tzaddikim. Rav Nachman bar Papa had a garden. He planted seeds, but it didn't grow. So boy Rachameh, he davened, also mitra v'tzamach, it started to rain, and then it grew. He says, Amr hainu deravasi. Oh, that's what Pshat Ravasi, that Hashem doesn't just want you to plant and then have it go on teva. Hashem wants you to daven. So sometimes he'll withhold the grain from growing in order to motivate you to daven. Amr Rav Chana bar Rava. So the pasuk mentions one of the non-kosher animals as a hashasua. It says, Hashasua es hagamol besarneves besashafan mali geirehemo parsalei afrisu. The animals that chew their cud but they don't have split hooves is a camel, a neves, a shafan, which are different types of rabbits. But it says hashasua. So the Gemara is going to explain basically hashasua is not an animal we have anymore. It's some sort of not mythical. It must have existed at some point. What's the shasua? Beria b'fnei atzmu. It's a creature in and of itself. Sheish shnei gavin. It has two backs and two spinal columns. All right. So this has the Gemara kasha. Honestly, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know what all these animals were? He's getting up in front of Klal Yisrael and he's telling you what animals are kosher, what animals not kosher. He wasn't, an expert in zoology. So says the Gemara. The Gemara says, "V'chi Moshe Rabbeinu kenigi or balstiri." Was Moshe Rabbeinu a kenigi or a balstiri? Kenigi is a hunter and balstiri is an archer, which the Gemara feels is a very, very poetic way of calling it archer and hunter. The Gemara likes that. It's like you'll read sometimes an article, let's say like a Torah article, like if you ever read Rav Pam, when Rav Pam wrote in English, he wrote a hesped for Rav David Leibowitz. In Rav Soloveitchik also, English is impeccable. And it's like a pleasure. Rav Hirsch also, you read this like English, that's translated obviously, but the point is, you read it and it's like a pleasure to read, it's written so well. So the Gemara liked that it said this lashon. You think Moshe Rabbeinu was an archer, a kanigi, or a balstiri? So the Gemara says, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to tell you all animals, it shows you that the Torah is from Hashem. Because it can't be Moshe, because Moshe didn't know all the animals. But the point is, says the Gemara, whenever you quote this teaching, use the lashon kanigi and balstiri. It's a good lashon. It's a very fine lashon. Don't dumb it down. Keep that lashon when you quote that Torah in the future. Keep the lashon in.
But this animal, the
Shasua, yeah.
is mentioned in Tanakh.
It's in the pasuk. It's in the pasuk that describes which are the non-kosher animals. It says Shasua, as a gamal, as a neves, as a shafan. Now that we mentioned, huh? Shasua, yeah. It's in Devarim. It's in Devarim. Yudalit. So the Gemara says, we mentioned this concept of keeping the lashon in. We're going to get to it in a second. Okay, from here until basically the rest is from the following pasuk. The pasuk says, it's listing when Yeshua died, the areas of Eretz Yisrael that were not yet conquered. It says, Chamishas Sarnei Plishtim, the 5 territory, the territories of the 5 princes of the Plishtim. Notice 5. Now let me count them. Azasi, 1, Ashdudi, 2, Ashkeloni, 3, Hagiti, 4, Ha'akroni, 5, Ha'avim, 6. So it says the 5 princes, and then it mentions 6 princes. So what's going on over here? It says in Amar Chamisha v'chasher Sisa, Amar Rav Yonasan, Arunki shalahem Chamisha. Out of the 6, 5 of them were princes, and one of them was just like the brother that was like an idiot. So the Avim, the last one, was not a prince. But notice how instead of describing princes as the Nesiim, it says Arunki. So the Gemara says the same thing. Amar le Rav Chizda Rav Tachliv bar Avimi, Kosav Arunki b'atecha Pirsha. When you quote this lashon, keep Arunki in. It's a good lashon. Okay. Now that we mentioned that the pasuk says that the princes of the Plishtim that were in Eretz Yisrael that were unconquered, it says 5, but it lists 6. So we said the Avim was not really a prince. He was a brother, but he wasn't as chashiv as the rest. Says the Gemara, Uplika derav, this statement that Avim was really from the Plishtim. And it's 6, I thought there's 5, he wasn't as chashiv as the rest. That's not like Rav. Damar Rav, Avim eteman boy. Rav disagrees. Rav says that Avim was actually not a Plishti prince. He was actually, unlike the 5, he was from Taman. So it says 5 Plishtim. There are 5 Plishtim, and Avim was really originally from Yemen. That he just joined the Plishtim, but he's not an actual Plishti. The Gemara says Tanya Mihachi. The Brisa similarly states Avim mitaman yibahu. The Avim were descended from Taman. They were not Plishtim. V'lama nikra shman Avim, and why are they called Avim? Shev Yosei Mekaimim, because they destroyed their homeland by leaving Taman, and they came to Eretz Yisrael. They they destroyed their homeland. Or a different shot is Avim is that they desired many gods, meaning they were very into, they joined the Plishtim because they liked a lot of deities. Or Avim shekol roya oisam achzosei afis. Or avis is the lashon of trembling. Anyone who saw them trembled because they were very, very powerful. Each and every one of the Avim had 16 rows of teeth. Whoa. Oh, okay. So they bring that on the bottom. It's a sign of cannibalism, meaning they had a lot of teeth. Meaning, in other words, they were cannibals. Okay. Now, says the Gemara like this. This will be the end of the daf. There are many psukim that one would burn, but they're really the Torah. What does that mean? So Rashi explains, there are many psukim that you'll come across and you'll be like, why do I need this information? It seems completely unnecessary. It feels like you could burn it. But no, there's Torah there. This is one of them. What is this one of them? The Gemara says, the pasuk says that the Avim were staying in Aza, and they were, again, we thought they were Plishtim, and according to one opinion, they were really from Taman. That's a pasuk that I would say, my nafka lamina. You could burn that pasuk. What do I care where the Avim were staying? You have this, by the way, and you learn like Navi enough, you'll come across like hundreds of psukim where you're like, I don't know what I'm gaining from this. But each pasuk has Gufi Torah. What's the chiddush? Mida ashvei Avra Avimelech laAvram im tishkar li linina lenechti. The pasuk describes that the Avim were sitting in Gaza. Now, this is in Devarim. This is when Klal Yisrael is about to enter Eretz Yisrael. They're going through this place called Avim. And it says that they were staying in Gaza. So you ask yourself, what's the nafkamina? He says, I'll tell you why. Because Avram Avinu made a deal with Avimelech, Melech Plishtim, that his children will not harass each other. So therefore, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, see, here's what Hashem did. I'll say it outside, I'll say it inside. It's very clever. It's clever, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If these Avim were originally Plishtim, then Klal Yisrael would have a problem. They're really not supposed to attack them. Avram made a deal with Avimelech, and we don't want to, So you know what they did was? Hashem sent the Avim, the Yemenites, to overcome the Plishtim, so they cleaned up the Plishtim, and then Klal Yisrael destroys the Avim, no problem. It's like you have this Lahel Alfei Avdalos, you have this like in sports, where it's like the 2 seeds, they fight each other, they knock each other out, and then your team just comes. So the Gemara says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Leisi kaftarim lifkim ha'avim hainu Plishtim. So let the Avim come, let them over from the Plishtim, Leisi shalom lifkim ha'kaftarim. So the point is, and that's why you see this pasuk, and it seems like it's unnecessary. No, it was orchestrating so that Klal Yisrael would not be poigim this shvua of Avram Avimelech. Ki yaitzav davar ataymer. We find similarly, the pasuk says, Ki cheshboin ir sichain melech hamayri hu hanilcham b'melech mayav. The pasuk is describing Sichain. When Klal Yisrael destroys Sichain, it says that Sichain was really an Amayri, and he destroyed Mayav, and now he's there. So you say like, okay, What do I care about what Sichon did before Moshe Rabbeinu got there? The answer is the same thing. Klal Yisrael are not supposed to affect Moav, made a deal with Moav that we wouldn't fight them. So Hashem sent Sichon to destroy Moav, and then we destroy Sichon. The Gemara says, Hashem told Klal Yisrael, do not bother Moav, do not provoke war with Moav. So therefore, Sichon fought Moav, won, and then we fought Sichon. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Sichon lifay Moav, v'leisisav lifay Sichon. V'aynu Rav Papa Ammon and Moav tir b'Sichon. That's what Rav Papa used to mean when he said that Ammon and Moav purified Sichon. What it means is that Hashem, Klal Yisrael were not allowed to fight Moav, so Ammon fought Moav, and then Klal Yisrael fought Ammon. The Gemara says the last one of this, Sidainim yikru l'chermain Siriyai. Sidainim would call Chermain Siriyai. Okay, the pasuk is another pasuk. He's like, what's the pasuk? The pasuk says that the Tzidainim would call their mountain Sirion. Okay. Tana, Snir v'Sirion Mahari Eretz Yisrael. Snir and Sirion are actually mountains that actually are in Eretz Yisrael. So what's the chiddush that they call their mountains these? The answer is that's how precious Eretz Yisrael is. That the goyim outside of Eretz Yisrael desire to call their mountains after the mountains of Eretz Yisrael. That's how chash of Eretz Yisrael is. Each nation built their own city, and they named it after the mountains of Eretz Yisrael. That the Goyim even recognize the greatness of the mountains of Eretz Yisrael. Similarly, we find the pasuk. It says regarding the Egyptians, this is the last one that the pasuk says that Yosef relocated all the Egyptians. He moved them around. You'll say it was a nafka mina. Who cares? The answer is Yosef did this because that way his brothers, Klal Yisrael, won't be called immigrants. They won't be the immigrants that are taking jobs because everyone's an immigrant. Yosef moved everyone around so that the brothers would be like everyone else. So it seems like a pasuk unnecessary, but then you realize there's taich in there. I will stop here.